Ideas of innovation and collaboration. How to future-proof quality in disability support. How can institutions use trusted partnerships and student-led service design to build a more connected, resilient, and future-ready model of disability support?
Things that already exist in your institution that could be built upon. So at Cambridge, our Disabled Students Campaign often kind of ran like a shadow service of sorts, in that we had a forum with lots of support groups, lots of policy documents. And if you're on the committee, you'd often find that you were being DM'd by students directly who wanted signposting, but for whatever reason didn't feel comfortable going to disability services to start with. I bring that up to say kind of thinking about what the appeal of that was. And there's not going to be everything that you can translate. Like, you can't tell students that get at university rush like a student can. But you can build on that. Like, what is it about that thought that will come up? And that you could get lots of opinions on a forum from a bunch of different students with different experiences. But also that the communication level is formal. Instead of having to draft an email with all the formal aspects, you got to talk like you would on social media, and I wonder if some of that might be interesting to increase engagement. And the other part I would say is a lot of universities have looked at disabled students through their awarding gaps research for their access and participation plans, and some of that has already been co-produced to students. I know from experience, some of those recommendations aren't realistic. The first one we did, they were like, that's not happening. But through working with the Cambridge Centre for Teaching and Learning, we did develop something that we thought was more feasible, which was a self-advocacy hub where, like, for whatever reason, we're too overwhelmed to go to disability services, but you could do it yourself, and having resources, email templates, that kind of thing to help you on that journey. And that was something that she was really interested in during our research. So I would say kind of look to those, see if there's any reports like that, where there is something realistic that you could take that is something the students really want, or whether there's something there that you can build upon with further kind of co-design focus groups or something like that.
Thanks, Anna. Jonathan.
3 thoughts. One is, bear in mind the context of the institution you're working at. So the previous job, a third of the student population were in their late teens, early 20s come from school. A third in their late 20s, early 30s come from college. The rest were coming in from the workplace. So 2/3 of the students typically were very time poor, and what they wanted and needed from us was very transactional. So in that context, co-design is a little optimistic. Where I work now, 2/3 are straight from school. This is more of a possibility. Thought number 2, having been interested in service design approaches for quite a while now, the one thing I've learned is that I might have Sharpies and Post-its. That does not make me a service designer. I need to recognize my skill set and my capacity to engage with training to develop, which is why in the previous job and the one before, the answer to this was because there was the opportunity to embed within teams an engagement worker post. A 5 college, a regional college, providing FEHE across 5-6 campuses. We embedded it within the student association, and the job descriptions began with the instruction that the post holder will have 100 conversations a week with students. So not sophisticated, but very, very effective in changing everything for the student association, because they suddenly had the opportunity to actually to amplify the student voice and present that to senior management, the board of governors. And I took that on to the next role. So within the disability team at Edinburgh Napier, again, we had an engagement worker, and the job description was 100 conversations a week, you will amplify the disabled student voice. So for a group who maybe weren't inclined or had the opportunity to talk up for themselves, we had a way into understanding what was happening actually in the classroom as they undertook assessments, feed that into the development of the team itself, and then into the wider development of the organization as a whole. And then picking up where you left off this morning, the trusted partnerships, the most important trusted partnership is with the student. But then straight after that, it's with the teaching staff. It's informing and supporting what's happening in the classroom. And one of the interesting things at the moment, as my current employer runs out of money, and the capacity across the board for lecturer CPD shrinks, actually in a twisted way, I think that's the opportunity for me and my colleagues across the wellbeing teams to fill a vacuum. And actually, there's the knowledge and expertise within the teams, and we can start to offer that out to the wider institution and answer some of the problems for them. And I think that's one of the opportunities to build up that partnership as reliable, useful colleagues in another part of the organization. And by building that working relationship to support them in their own main core of their job, that's how we'll then see the spin-off benefit when it comes to supporting individual students.
Brilliant. And thanks, Jonathan. I think some great ideas there. And I think one of the key things that came out at 3 or 4 of the other events from other NADP representatives about giving the student, creating an opportunity for the student to have a voice. So I think that engagement, if you like, creating that opportunity, because it's not easy for them. So I think creating some opportunity, we might come on to that again in the group work question will come next, but I think some great insight there. Natasha.
Hi everyone, just some thoughts on student-led design that we've been working on. I think what's been really interesting today is the first thing is listen, isn't it? We just all assume that we're doing that, but actively listen. Student knowledge is really, really important, so that we can ensure that we're telling students the right information and signposting them correctly. So at Amano, we've got something called the Inclusion Connection. So it looks a bit like a closed Facebook page, but it allows all of our support workers, and there's about 400 of them now, to share information. So you can imagine how valuable that can be at times for different people. Amano, we try to attend Welcome Week with our universities. So we're on the ground when the students start, and we start listening to them straight away. With regards to the website that Andy mentioned, along with that goes a co-branded email signature, which sounds like a very, very simple thing, but something we forget. So it actually shows Bristol and Amano together. So when we're writing out to students, it's always there. It's always ready for them. We also look at student engagement on a weekly basis. We have something called a Mind the Gap spreadsheet. And that's what we started calling it. It's actually a really good name, because what it does is it finds students that aren't engaging. There could be anything happening for those students. So we are trying to get hold of them. We are trying to listen to them, and we're trying to help them to re-engage with us and actually with their course, make sure that they're retained on their course, and then help them with their attainment. We've also linked up with careers services, because in years 2 and 3, students want to start thinking about, getting a job, or what's going to happen next, what's going to come next for them. So in terms of those skill sets that Andy mentioned, and those strategies, they can be really helpful to start looking at, the values that the student has, the skill set, and how they're gonna start forming their CV. And then finally, we have done some group support in the past, and some of that can be really helpful. But I know that's in the next questions.
Have any institutions explored offering group-based support for disabled students, particularly in contexts where funding and staffing resources are limited?
I think most people, including us, when we read that question initially, assumed it was talking just about NMH. What's been interesting is the answers that have come out, and I know they'll get shared today, actually aren't about NMH. There's a load of group support out there, but there is no one size fits all. I don't know who wants to kick off. Jonathan, is there anything you would like to kick off with?
I think most of us are doing this already, and we possibly don't even notice. I think most of us will run a transition event pre-session for autistic students, and one of the things we'll typically do is encourage them to share social media details, and that's a way, some use more than others, of generating peer support. I don't see this as necessarily a cheap option or the response to budget cuts. I see this as a valuable addition. And one of the things we're doing at the moment at Dundee is creating the range of forums and spaces to bring people together, acknowledging that some people are more comfortable in a group than others. So one of the highlights of induction week last year for me was not that on the Friday afternoon we had a room full of people playing board games or making origami penguins. There's a reason for the penguins. It's a discovery thing in Dundee. You could have your own origami shape of your choice. So it wasn't the board games, it wasn't the penguins, it was the people sat adjacent to the board games and the penguins. They felt comfortable enough to come into a room, but that Friday not quite comfortable enough to join in, but the next time they'd be back. Because it was a safe, reassuring space in the way that maybe the classroom wasn't, or the library wasn't yet. So one of the things we're doing is generating these forums and spaces and opportunities for people to come together in a way that is realistic for them, and slowly will build up trust and familiarity. So from indoor spaces, we're developing a growing project, and actually the growing bit's irrelevant. It's just another space, and it's outside, and if you want a bit of respite away from everybody else, you can come, and there's the cover stuff you can do some weeding, or you could eat some of the salad that's growing. Most of that's irrelevant. It's about creating safe spaces and safe opportunities for people.
And again, we've heard that across the 5 events, and that's that opportunity for a voice. Creating that safe space to give an opportunity for the voice, for the conversation that can then lead to all sorts of things. Anna, I think it's a good time to bring you in on this.
Yeah, I mentioned that I went to those kind of pre-arrival days, and I would stress is remembering those statistics about students being multiply disabled. If you tailor it to autistic students, remember that we might have other needs. So our arrival day didn't necessarily cover accommodation, but that was one of the things I was most worried about because I needed things for my physical conditions. So I think not tailoring can be bringing those students together, but not necessarily assuming what they need because of that condition. Outside of that, Cambridge had an autistic social support group run by the Disability Services. And I know Felicity, the DSUK speaker, mentioned that Swansea has one that is more support targeted by students decide what they're covering. But I did not go to the Cambridge support group, and that's because 19-year-old me thought I was too cool for it. And I know that that's a silly reason, and I can acknowledge that now, but I do think that that is a real fact. So that's in why students don't come to these things. But I did engage with the Disabled Students campaign, and I think part of that was that it wasn't based on a specific condition. It was more about that political identity and those shared experiences more broadly. And I think that there is something there that Disability Services can also tap into, and did. So the Library Accessibility Services at Cambridge came to us and asked if they could run a workshop with the Disabled Students campaign, because otherwise, when students see that at the disability service, they think, well, I am not blind or partially sighted, therefore I don't need their services. But they came and showed the whole variety of what they do. It genuinely helped me, and I know it helped others, and that word of mouth began to spread. So I think tapping into those student groups that are already there could be a potential way to build that support as well.
Again, back some great insight. Natasha?
It's funny, some things. So we did group study skill sessions at the University of Bristol. We did find that over time, the amount of students coming tailed off a bit. So we are looking at that with them at the moment to see how we can make it more relevant for students, to see whether we can engage a few more. Again, autism pre-induction groups, we are involved in that. So for example, we're going to go along to the University of the East of England one in August and just talk to those students about non-medical help, what it's about, how it could help them, etc. The final one is body doubling. So I'm sure everybody's heard of this, but everybody logs on together onto a Zoom call, etc. And they just work together. Works particularly well for ADHD students, particularly using the Pomodoro technique. So they're all working on their individual work, but the fact that there's somebody else working alongside them, even if it's remote, tends to help concentration, etc. So some interesting ideas.
We know support such as one-to-one study skills and mentoring can make a real difference, but too often students don't engage or they drop off and we don't always know why. Have the panel got any thoughts on this?
I'm going to start this with Anna, because again, I think she'll lead us straight into that guilt and anxiety and how should we support students to get back into support if they haven't, and what does drop off mean?
Yeah, so I think thinking about drop off as someone was looking to re-engage. One of my friends had depression, she ghosted her mentor and was too scared to go back. She didn't know whether she'd get in trouble or if they would pretend it never happened. And I feel like potentially something like how libraries do those loan amnesties, where they're like, you're not in trouble, we just really want our books back. And doing the same thing where like we can talk about why you dropped off or we just pretend it never happened. That kind of thing, I think, because she was autistic, it would have given her those social rules to re-engage, because like anything, no mental health is a social thing where you don't necessarily have the rules written down, how it works. And then for me, I engaged with some specialist study skills during my MA, but I only had one session. And for me, that was all I needed. It kind of just, for me, it validated that what I was doing was correct and that I could take sick days if I needed, because that was something I was quite hard on myself about. If she was like, you can treat it like a job where you would call in sick and don't have to worry about that, you could have an extension. I don't know if I was listed as a drop-off statistic, because I think people normally engage with them for a few sessions. But that was all I needed. And I think recognizing that the way people choose to engage can be short-term. And like Andy said, it could be 20 hours rather than 60, or it could literally just be half an hour, like her hand.
It's great. Jonathan?
You weren't meant to come to me next because I'm just going to echo exactly what you said. It's about being upfront that this is an active, reflective engagement that's led by the students. So if you start your first appointment with a student and say, I'm here to you as and when you need me, then you're setting the rules very much on their terms and engaging them in that. If they say, that's nice, I'll see you in a few months' time, maybe, nice. Maybe you follow up. That said, going back to you and yours, mind the gap spreadsheets. One of the interesting things I've learned in the past year of this new job at Dundee is the overall disclosure rate is a little below the national average. Engagement with NMH is massive. A much more heavily engaged, intensively engaged student group than I was used to in the previous job. Nothing wrong with what we were doing there. That was relevant for that student population. But one of the things that Dundee has done over the past 2-3 years is keep a close eye on, because NADP is outsourced, rates and engagement with the external agency and their staff, and keeping an eye on who was engaging, who stopped engaging, who never engaged at all, and sending out those reassuring reminders that there weren't any fines.
Yeah.
We don't want anything back from you, but just bear in mind we're still here as and when. And that's all okay because it's led by the student.
Absolutely. And that segues beautifully into what Natasha's going to conclude with, I think.
How do you know?
Just a guess.
So yes, really, building on everything there. So at Amano, our students have their own support workers. So a support worker will try to engage with the student. If they won't, after 5 or 6 times of contacting, they then come back to the office. And in the office, we contact them regularly, weekly, fortnightly, depending on the time of year, by email or text. We don't ring students. I don't know about you. I don't answer my mobile phone if I don't know what the number is. Students aren't going to either. And we're just very gentle. we're just we're still here. Do you want to change your support worker? Do you want to do something a bit different? Let us know. Get in contact with us. And I was worried that perhaps we overdid it a bit. And then disabled students last year, I was talking to them about it, and I was saying, we're making students' lives difficult. And the R's came back and they were like, no, because a lot of students use their spoons that day. The administrative burden, as we all know, can be massive for them. They've just run out of energy when they get that text or they get that email. So if we keep trying, one day they might have a day where actually they haven't run out of energy and they can act upon that. And actually, if they don't want to, they can just say, please stop contacting me, and we'll got. But we do actually keep trying the whole life of their course until their course end date, because we want to make sure that nobody is going without if it could really prove it.
Brilliant. Super. So that brings us to the end. We've run over a little. We always do. So don't worry about that. Massive thank you to our volunteers, to Anna, to Jonathan, and to Natasha. A brave world to sit up at the front and take questions and have a live discussion. Yes, you knew what the questions were, but I guarantee you all 6 discussions across the different regions went in very different directions. But we've learned a lot from them ourselves, and we'll be thinking about how we change our service based on that. Hopefully, there's a few little tidbits of things that you can think about and go back to your businesses with. So, massive thank you. Let's have a round of applause.
Follow us on LinkedIn for all the latest insights and CPD events in disability support at EQS-disability-support.